What we've been doing on the papers is different from Wikileaks. We took the view early on that there was some danger in a raw dump of this data. And I think Wikileaks also agreed with that.
The way we go about finding the stories in this pile of more than 250,000 cables is to use a search engine very similar to Google. We'll punch in search terms, we can search by date, we can search by where the cable has come from, which embassy it's been sent from, and then that produces a list of cables that match those search terms, and then it's just an old-fashioned job of reading through the cables that are there and looking for information that we think is interesting.
Early on, we decided that we should put somebody into the process who wasn't looking for stories, but was simply looking for the possible harm to sources or information that was, by virtue of what it was saying, could be misused. And so we have had a team that's been working for 4 or 5 weeks now, and they linked up with similar teams on Speigel and Monde, Pais, New York Times. And so there's been a network of, as it were, redactors who haven't been looking at the stories at all. They've just been looking at the sources.
Once those stories are complete and we're sure about which cables we want to publish in the newspaper and on the web alongside the story, we then take a view as reporters about the information that's in that cable and if any of it needs to be redacted for any reason.
They will do a first go through it when they're writing the story, and they will take out any obvious source references, any particularly sensitive information. Once they've done that, this passes into our production system, where various senior editors will have a look at it as well. Obviously, they're looking at it from the point of view of the story angle. My particular concern is making sure that any sensitive names are taken out, that if we need to protect a source, the name comes out, not only their name, their title, but also any references to location that may identify them. Dates are important as well. There may be information in there that may not seem important when looked at in conjunction with the story, but it can be very sensitive.
I was interested in finding out what cables had to say about football in the world. Obviously, we've been interested in its sort of global impact in terms of Abu Dhabi buying Man City and Abramovich buying Chelsea. And in the course of doing that search, we turned up a cable which looked at Burma and the military regime's interest in football, and in particular this interesting fact that they'd even considered buying Manchester United at one point for $1 billion. But then the cable revealed that this information had come from informants to the US Embassy inside Burma who we wanted to protect because Burma is widely known to be an oppressive regime.
Certain details have had to be removed to do with business dealings, sponsorship deals, they've had to be taken out. Anything that really points to particular individuals that could be sort of pinpointed as the origin of the story and who could be in some difficulties if their names came out. The lawyers are looking at this as well for issues of defamation, company names are coming out, individuals are coming out if there are ongoing court cases, and just the kind of breadth of material that the cables cover means that we've had to involve an enormous number of people in the process, a lot of reporters who have specialisms in particular areas, and sometimes we'll be taking whole paragraphs out, sometimes we'll decide not to run a cable because it is too sensitive to make sense for our story. So this process has been happening, hour by hour, every day over the last 2 weeks. And as I say, we've got through hundreds and hundreds of cables, and as the story has developed, we're looking at new cables all the time, and trying to keep keep this process in tandem with what our partners are doing in America and Germany, France, Spain, to make sure that we can make this as this whole process as rigorous and as safe as possible, while getting the best stories out of it.
The overall effect of WikiLeaks, to coin a phrase, it's too early to tell. I mean, we don't yet know how this information is going to play in the Far East or in the Middle East or in Russia or in America. And I think it's not the job of journalists to think too much about the long-term consequences of what they're doing. But I think it is important to think about the short-term consequences, particularly for individuals. And so that, I think, is what places newspapers in a different position from Wikileaks. And I think it's quite striking how this is now the third cache of material that we've handled, the three papers, New York Times, Der Spiegel and The Guardian. And lots of people predicted originally that lots of harmful things were going to happen as a result. And the Secretary of State for Defense, Robert Gates, came out last month and said actually they couldn't yet identify any harm that had happened as a result of the Iraq and Afghanistan leaks. And I think that was largely due to the care and the detail to attention that news organizations have been able to bring to the greatest dump of data in history.